Okay. Ready? We're all ready. Okay, now I get to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Brent Bill. He's a phenomenal writer, writing coach, photographer, retreat leader, and Quaker minister. His first book was published in 1984, and since then he's written dozens more, including this one, Amity, Stories from the Heartland, which I believe is his latest book. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Brent lives in Hendricks County on the Ploughshares Farm, which is 40 acres of former family farmland that's being transformed and reclaimed for native hardwood forests and seasonal prairie grass. Today, he's going to share a few exercises of his writing from his popular Writing from the Heart workshop that's been featured at the Indiana Writers Center and in Midwest Writers Workshop, and now here for us. So now I'm going to stop talking and turn the program over to Brent.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm going to see if I can start sharing my screen. Now I have to look to see where I find it here.
Click on the outside more, and then you'll go back. Like, yeah, and then now go more, and then share right up there, and.
Huh.
Yes, sir. Oh, just. Click out of that.
Okay,
Now
but
you can.
It's not showing.
that's fine. I can talk from it. I don't need to share screen. I can do it this way. Let me do it. And move back to where I was.
I'm sorry, actually, go back to the share thing.
Oh. What now?
Try to share your screen again from Zoom.
Now share screen's not showing up. That's fine. I don't need it. It was just my notes for me. So I will do this so I can see. And how's that? So I appreciate the invitation to be here, and this is a workshop I've been leading for about 20 years, actually. Well, the workshop itself's not that long, but I've been doing this workshop for 20 years. And part of my belief was that something I heard from the novelist Wally Lamb years ago said, if a book is true, it will find an audience that is meant to read it. If a book is true, it'll find the audience that's meant to read it. And I've often thought, what makes a book true? And I think first it has to ring true to us and who we are. The experience we want to write from, or the stories that we want to tell. Think about John talking about, I won't say it right, Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism. It's obviously something that really matters to you. And so I think that that's one of the things that we need to remember to write. I've written a lot of books, as Janice said. My first book came out in 1984, and it was a book on rock and roll, of all things. And I've been writing ever since. And so my latest is this little book called Amity, Stories from the Heartland. It's my first book of fiction. I've been writing nonfiction for years.
Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Writing nonfiction for years, but have been writing these short stories in the background in between writing projects. And so I finally put them all together in a new collection, and I have copies. If anybody wants to see any of my books, they're back there in the back. But William Wordsworth once said, fill your paper with the breathings of your heart. Not your mind, but your heart. So I'm doing a real short version of the whole workshop here, but just going to do a couple exercises from it that you can do, including the folks online as well. But you do still have to work from our brain, but most of the time we too often write from our left brain, that very analytical outline, let's do this sort of thing. And I think we need to also engage our right brains, our kind of artsy sides, or as my kids go, oh, dad's in his artsy fartsy place. So that's where our intuition, our daydreaming, all those things come from. And too often when we're writing, we shut that out. And I believe that part of learning to write from our right brain puts us in the right mind to write, to be a little bit more creative. And so for those of you who are here, I'm going to pass out some paper so that you can, because this is a writing exercise. So I hope you brought something to write with. You don't have to use my paper if you don't want to, but just one. Yeah. Only have my insulin pen and the insulin pen wouldn't help you very much. So this is a little exercise I like to do with folks, and I want you to take a piece of paper, and in the middle of it, I want you to write birds of a feather. Birds of a feather. Okay. And then, trying not to be all analytical about it, I want you to write words related to birds, feathers, and the phrase birds of a feather all around there. So anything that's related to birds or feathers or what you think of when you see birds of a feather. I'm just going to give you a minute. Just write those down real fast. Words associated with birds, feather, birds of a feather. Don't overthink it. Just the first words that come to mind. You got about 10 more seconds. Okay, your time's up. Now, what I want you to do is look at those words, and then you're going to have 2 minutes to write a paragraph with all those words. Write a paragraph on birds of a feather based on the words you came up with. There's no wrong way to do it. This is just a little exercise to get our creative juices flowing. So using the words you came up with, write something from birds of a feather. Okay, about 30 more seconds is all. You're not going for polished pros, you're just having fun with an exercise. Okay, time's up. So a question I'd ask you as you look at it, does this look like your usual writing or a little bit different?
Different.
Different, some of the same?
Sort of.
Okay. I mean, part of it, this particular exercise, we're always taught avoid cliches, uh, and so, but it's hard when you're doing a draft. A cliche feels kind of right to stick in there. So this is a thing you can do, birds of a feather is a cliche. So this is an exercise you can do to kind of turn the cliche upside down and be able to say it in a fresh way. So it doesn't sound, so you don't say birds of a feather. What are fresh ways to say it? Now, the paragraph you came up with may not be the right way, but it's still to get your mind flowing. Anybody want to share what they came up with? John?
The avian adventurers took flight high above in glistening skies. They sought new nests in their migration, a camaraderie of instinct. Their chirping din spread for miles.
Thanks.
Wow.
Do you want to?
No, I have a brain tumor, and so mine wasn't very, wasn't spectacular.
No, it doesn't have to be. It's just an exercise.
Yeah. It is hard to write with the feather tickles and my son and makes my senses tweak.
Let's see,
I only came up with a few words. It's more difficult for me to write these days, but I do.
Roberta wrote in chat, the Raptors were soaring at Kessler in college again. There's a whole flock of them, a family soaring and circling. Sometimes you find a feather in a yard, soft, magical. Most of the birds stop singing, but not the crows. They're a family too, and they take dirty offense at the big raptors chasing them with noisy song. Anybody else want to share theirs?
It's not much. The birds kept attacking the thistles next to the fence. I wondered how many seeds one bird must eat each day to keep flying, especially this time of year when migration is near. The flutter of golden wings would soon disappear.
Okay.
I can do mine.
Okay. Carol, is that you? You're muted.
Well, I tried to undo my video, but I guess I'm too ugly today and it wouldn't let me. I have little experience with birds, but I did identify a hawk in trouble. Okay, wait a minute. Hawks mate for life. This became a sad experience for me. While in Evansville, I was living for a few days in a dorm due to lack of hotel space available. Outside my window, and then I described, I found a hawk who was injured or sick with its mate. and I had to call somebody from, I don't know, it was DNR or somebody to come and take the hawk away. And then when I came back, I saw the mate just sitting there looking sad. It was a very sad experience for me.
One of the different, because my word association with birds of a feather was like-minded individuals or groups. And here's my paragraph. The crowd consisted of a like-minded collection of individuals gathered together to celebrate the election of the president, who promised to understand them. They were dressed in colorful clothes, matching or contrasting colorful hair, many with tapered edge framing their face. The movement along the street was graceful with songs.
Okay. Yeah,
Birds of a feather flap their wings together. They come from different nests, but all support their young with the worms and bugs which surround them. Birds of a feather chirp, sometimes chirp as they hop along, but once their eyes find their destination, they take flight.
okay. Yeah, I mean, and there's no, one right way to do it. It's what works for you to help free up your brain so you can think more creatively instead of just being very careful. So often when we write, at least for many of us, we begin to edit as we're writing. And we don't do what Anne Lamott, I would never say this word myself, but what she calls the shitty first draft. And just let it out and see what's there. Because you always get to go back and clean it up. I started writing from the heart when a friend of mine, who's a wonderful editor, asked me, she goes, you're a good writer. And I kind of smiled. And then she goes, would you like to be a great writer? It's like, now what can you say to that? I'm from the Midwest where I grew up. So normally I would say, well, good's good enough. But when your favorite editor asks you, do you want to be great? And I said, so what do I need to do? And she goes, your writing is technically really sound and you've sold lots of books. And this was about 20 years into my writing career. I mean, I'd written 15 books by then. And she said, you play it safe too much. You play it safe. You don't reveal yourself to the reader enough. So you need to be more transparent and invite the reader into your experience so that they see your passion. Said, you need to reveal your heart a little bit. She goes, sometimes when I'm reading you, you get almost there and then you pull back. And I said, well, I am an introvert. And, so I'm careful about guarding my feelings. She goes, most writers are introverts. But the really good ones reveal enough of themselves that it invites the reader into their life. And so you need to learn to do that. And she goes, and always remember, you get the final edit. But in the drafts, especially, say how you're really feeling. Write how you're really feeling. Let it get out there. And that way you'll invite the reader into what matters most to you. And if it matters to you, it will somehow matter to them. And she also said, finally, trust your heart. It's wise. Well, I grew up in a circle, a particular religious group that you didn't want to trust your heart because it could be, that trusting your heart get you into trouble. And that was pretty true. I mean, I was falling in love all the time if I trusted my heart. Every fall, I loved school because there was a bunch of new young women to meet, and many of them hadn't turned me down yet. So, so to learn to follow your heart. I think also writing from the heart results in writing that's true at the deepest human level. It really gets at what matters. And it often keeps us from falling into cliche. So now I'm going to skip this exercise and move on to something else. Brenda Hewlin, who once wrote a book on memoir, on telling your story. This is from the 30s, but it's a really powerful book. Brenda Hewlin is her name. And so this has gender-specific language because I didn't change it. I don't like changing historical language. But she says, everyone's original if he tells the truth, if he speaks from himself. But it must be from his true self and not the self he thinks he should be. I mean, how often do we write from the self we think we should be? That's when my friend Lil, the editor who I mentioned earlier, she'd often write in when she was working on my manuscript, she'd go, okay, now I know you're a preacher, but stop it. Because, she goes, you're getting a little too preachy and you're getting into that place where you're standing up in front of people and being the person they think you ought to be if you're speaking from a pulpit. And she said teachers do that sometimes too. They get their teacher voice on, but it's not their heart voice, and it's not the voice that's most true to us. So try and find the voice of you as that is your truest self. Since many readers read with their ears, and they hear a voice and different things, our bodies are also part of writing from the heart. Sensory details can help us get into the characters or stories that we're telling. So I want you to think of a word. And I'm going to pass out just pull a word out of thin air, and you would give everyone one of these. But don't look at it till you pick your word. And this is a sensory writing detail, and I'll explain it for the folks online, what's on the sheet of paper when I ask you to turn it over, but don't start writing right away. Just get a word in mind.
Any word or?
Any word, any word in mind. Okay, and then I'm going to have you, what's on the sheet of paper here is a sensory detail, and it says there are 5 sentences there that you have to complete. And the first one is, my word smells like. My word tastes like. My word feels, and I mean tactily, not emotionally. What does that word feel like? That word sounds like. And finally, it looks like. What visually does it look like? So those are the sentences to complete. So if your word was love, love smells like, love tastes like, love feels like, tactily, love sounds like, and it looks like. So you have just a few minutes to fill those sentences in with the words you chose. Well, don't take too long on this, just try and do it as quick as you can, those sensory details that would come out for each of your words. Getting out of the head and into the physical realm. Got one more minute to get finished up. Unless you're already finished, then you get an A. Or a publishing contract for your next story or book. Okie dokie. What was that like to come up with different sensory experiences for the words that you came up with? Was it easy or hard?
Challenging.
Okay,
I couldn't do it.
that's fine.
I understand it. I understand the exercise, but I just couldn't do it. I know it'll help me to do that.
Anybody want to share their word and what they came up with? Sure.
My word was passion,
Passion.
and I wrote, passion smells like a forest of trees and flowers, the sea and a meadow. Passion tastes like sweet fruit. Passion feels like the form of a woman's body. Passion sounds like the songbird's call. And passion looks like a starry sky and a bright moon.
That's good.
Thank you.
Others?
Bridget had some.
I can.
Okay,
Mine is nausea.
okay,
Smells like putrid. Makes me dizzy. Gives me the shakes. Hard to breathe. Makes my stomach rumble.
okay. Roberta has one, you say? Bridget?
Bridget. Maybe, I don't know if she wants to come up.
You want to read it, Bridget, or you want someone here to read it?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My word was solitude. So my word smells like winter. My word tastes like water. My word feels like home. My word sounds like silence. My word looks like sitting in a rocking chair on the back porch. And then then I think Elizabeth said it should be feel like tactic or it should be what's it smell like? And I said, well, it smells like defeat now. And I said, maybe Christmas. My word smells like Christmas. And then she said, my feeling should be tactical. And I said, it feels like a warm blanket.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
My word was joy. And I had, it smells like chai tea latte or roasting gentian. It tastes like gooseberry pie. Joy feels like soft lamb. Joy sounds like laughter and looks like smiling faces.
Okay.
Roberta has one on chat. Okay. chat.
It's
Well,
right down there next to react at the very bottom,
In the middle.
in the middle there,
Yes.
to the left.
One more.
It says a number.
There we go.
Okay. My word smells like grape. So what is your word? My word smells like grape, tastes sweet, feels sticky, sounds like the birds, looks like the sky. Oh, my word was blue. Okay. Thank you. Well, again, it's just an exercise to, especially with words that are too much in our head, to try and get us out of our head and into a sensory kind of life. It's one of my hardest things to do when I'm writing. I was thinking when I was trying to convey different feelings in writing fiction, how it felt to the person that was experiencing it and different things that were happening in this. And one of these is they're driving out in the country, and I tried to figure out what does it feel like to be out in the country, driving along, mad at somebody else, angry with somebody else. And so they're late to going someplace, and it says, there were rooster tails of dust rising slowly behind them. The road was rough, he had to slow. He lowered the window. The sweet smell of corn and beans baking in the summer sun swept into the car. The wind swirling around, fine powder dirt lifted by prairie winds floated into the car, settled on his perspiring face. His wife didn't say anything. She just looked out the window. So by trying to set the scene with sensory details, hopefully that has some of the desolation. They're out in the middle of the country. So two of them, there's all this dust, but there's all the sensory detail. Those of us in the Midwest who've been able to go out in the country in the summer, you smell those crops in the sun. And so to try and bring them alive. So that's what this is about, especially for abstract words, to try and figure out how can I make that more real to the reader and get it out of my head. I'm going to give you a couple things of advice. It's not a writing exercise, but something that I found helpful. I wrote to a number of my writing friends. I was joking with Janice. I'm a big John Prine fan, and he has this line in a song called "All My Friends Turned Out to Be Insurance Salesmen." Well, all my friends turned out to be writers and songwriters. And so I wrote to a bunch of them, and I said, what advice would you give to people about writing from the heart, to get them to write from their heart? And this is one that came back that I'll share with you because I found it helpful, especially. But Minnie Lamberth is her name. She's a Southern writer. And she said, identify some words that help you remember why you're writing. Identify some words that help you remember why you're writing. Your words could be something like healing, family, community, faith, entertainment. Pick your own guiding words. And so I offer that advice to you. The guiding words are not like GPS. They're not going to take you exactly to where you want to go while writing, but they're more like a compass, which will guide you as you keep going towards them. And they need to come from the deepest part of your heart, because that's where the power in writing is. So think about what word you use is writing. they may vary from project to project too. But for this, what's your North Star of writing, the thing that where your compass is pointing towards this? And that helps you keep going that direction. Yeah, John?
That is, I like that. And I had to think about it. And I think that personally, in all my writing, regardless of genre, the guiding word is culture.
Okay.
And it is a part of everything that I write, from nonfiction to fiction. It all has to do with culture. And I guess that permeates in everything. And I was, as you were talking, I was thinking of what is the word that I could find that all of my writing has in common. And at the end of the day, if you boil it all down, what rises to the top. And I think that culture is that.
Good. And I think that just helps us keep on track. For my nonfiction writing, mine has often been, I call it pilgrim, not expert. I don't want to write as an expert because then it gets really boring to the readers, but somebody who's traveling the path with the reader, that helps me keep my voice the way I want it, with conversational, accessible, helps make the writing more invitational, invites the reader into it. So again, the guiding words are just something you come up with to help you move along. Things that I think about writing from the heart, or at least I found, because when Lil gave me that advice, and that was 20 years ago, I found out that my writing became more invitational. That is, it invited the reader in instead of holding them at arm's length. It made them part of the project. Another thing, it was also hospitable. You can invite somebody to your house for dinner and not be at all hospitable because it's somebody you don't necessarily really want to be with that night. So if you're going to invite somebody, how do you make it hospitable for them once they get there? And I think writing from the heart also does that. Another thing I think it does is it makes your writing more accessible. It helps you get away from jargon or anything else that is about, oh, look how smart I am. It is something that they can grasp and be invited into, which is really important, it seems to me. There's a story, I'm a Quaker. So there's a story about this famous Quaker writer who once came to a local Quaker meeting, and in Quaker meeting, in the silence, anybody can stand up and speak. But this guy, being a famous writer, everybody expected him to stand up and speak. So he stood up and speak and gave a little message, sat down. And as soon as he sat down, this little old lady stood up and she goes, as I recall, Rufus, Jesus said, feed my sheep, not feed my giraffes. The thing, everything went over her head that he was saying. So how do you make it accessible? I think writing from the heart, I don't want to make it sound sentimental because I don't think it is. It's fierce. I mean, just like love can be really fierce. And, one thing I heard sitting in the back was John's talking about Afrofuturism. There's passion about that. And he's fiercely committed to telling these stories. So truly from the heart. Another thing is it's authentic. It rings true. The reader's going, I resonate with that. It may not be my experience, but that rings true. It's also, I think, what most stories are, but that we get away from sometimes in writing, is grounded in daily life. I mean, where do we experience our greatest truths? I mean, I think of all the sermons I've heard over the years, and I don't remember very many of them, but I remember what I learned in daily life and experience with other people. So grounded in the stuff of daily life. And those are things that are also important to the reader. Now, one of the things that holds us back from writing from the heart, I believe, is that we get scared of doing that. We get scared of writing in the first place.
Yeah.
It's fearsome. And what if they don't like it? Who wants to read it? Richard Rhodes, who won a number of Pulitzers, once wrote, if you want to write, you can. Fear stops most people from writing, not lack of talent, whatever that is. Who am I? What right have I to speak? Who will listen to me if I do? And he says, you're a human being with a unique story to tell, and you have every right. If you speak with passion, many of us will listen. We need stories to live. All of us. We live by story, and yours enlarges the circle. So I'm going to quit talking and see if you have questions either about anything I presented or just writing in general, because I've been doing this a long time now, and I'm not an expert. I'm a fellow traveler on this path, but I can offer anything that I've kind of learned if you have questions. Yeah.
Not so much a question, but just as a statement, because it's interesting, the topics that you spoke of here. Just last week, I taught a class, workshop on writing from the heart, but it was a different direction, more so in that it was some of the things that you touched upon were part of that workshop, but it was more about how to apply emotion to your writing. And not something that is in a passive voice, but something that is very real that the reader can relate to. And that listing of things that you just had up there were a lot of the topics that I hit on. It's just very surreal to be here with you speaking about this. So I just want to thank you. And you've given me some things to think about for my next writing from the heart class when I start talking about emotions in writing and how I can help the attendees to go a little deeper. So thank you for this. This is really good.
Yeah, this is normally a 3-hour or a week long, depending, In July, I was supposed to do this for a week-long group of people out in Philadelphia, but some other circumstances came in and I wasn't able to go. So in the longer ones, we have more time to do writing and share writing and all that sort of thing. But so this is a super condensed. There are lots more activities that we do to help us get to the heart of the matter.
What's your next book? And where did you get the idea?
Well, the next book is actually a follow-up collection of short stories. So it's called Queen for a Day. If anybody is old enough to remember that old TV show. Janice asked me a question about, so where do you get these stories? And I said, good writers, I think, are born out of good listeners and good readers. I grew up in a family of storytellers. And so as the epigram in this book says, some of my lies are true. That's a Huey Lewis and the News song. Some of my lies are true. And so they're parts of real life stories that I've heard in a lot of these short stories or the new ones that I'm writing, experiences that I've heard, things that I think, now what, I wonder what that is. You remarked on the second story. It's about a woman in the 1930s who wants to learn how to drive. And part of that story is rooted in truth, but it's also, I had to change character, something completely different from me, to try and get into what might she feel? Because I'm not a woman. Yeah, I'm not a woman. I wasn't born in the super patriarchal society of the 1930s, and having this desire to learn how to drive. What's it going to be like for me? Plus, what's the environment like in 1930? And so to move back on all that, it was really fun to move into those stories and get me out of my white male persona to be able to do that. And so I try and write stories with different characters that are much different. In the writing, the longer version of this workshop, there's an exercise about writing a short piece about, you list all your characteristics, your favorite food, your height, your weight, your ethnicity, whatever. And okay, so now you have to write from the perspective of somebody who's completely opposite and write a first person story, to help us imagine, people who are other than us, which helps us expand our audience, I believe. But yeah, the next one's based on a short story, or a story a friend of mine told me about their pastor's wife, who was so frustrated with how poor they were paid that she applied to be on Queen for a day because she wanted a new washing machine. So, yeah.
You wrote something about rock and roll. What was
Yeah.
that?
Well, that was back in 1984 when there were a lot of, especially youth pastors and others, who were talking about how evil rock and roll was, and if you listen to it, you'd burn in hell and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And I grew up playing in bands, and I was still very religious. And so I wrote the anti those guys book that was saying, it's not all good, it's not all bad. It's like everything else. You got to listen and see, what do you think about this? How, and it had a history of rock and roll. And I got my friend Peter, Paul, and Mary to write the forward to it.
Is that book still in print?
Now, you can still find copies of it, but it sold 40,000
Where would you
copies.
find a copy?
Amazon has used copies.
What's the name of it?
Rock and roll, proceed with caution. With caution, yeah. So I also got a lot of hate mail about that book too, because some people bought it for their kids and they thought it was another one of the anti-rock and roll things. And so they'd send me letters. I kept one that went on 13 pages about why I was going to burn in hell. And then it was signed in Christian love. So I wrote back and I write back to everybody who writes me. I wrote back and thanked them. So, yeah.
Ever have imposter syndrome?
Always.
Deal with it.
Always. I mean, it's just like Richard Rhodes quote said, who am I? Who am I to write? I mean, when I grew up, I said I was raised one of two places, the Highland Avenue Friends Meeting or the Eltonia branch of the Columbus Public Library. And so I was either at church or reading. And, I read everybody, but my heroes as, in junior high, were James Thurber, Ogden Nash, and they were just so brilliant and funny. And Thurber was from Columbus, Ohio, which is where I lived, and so I thought, here's this kid who grew up to be a writer, who grew up, I knew where his house was, and it's like, writers are so smart and they're so wonderful. And then I became one, and I've realized we're not any smarter than anybody else. Some of us just sell more, and some of us act like we are, but most of us are just feel we have something to say, and finally are brave enough to sit down and try and say it. And on the way here, I called my sister, and in Columbus. And this is this is the first time I've gone out. My wife died 6 weeks ago after she had dementia for 4 years, and I was her caregiver. And I said, this is my first speaking thing in 4 years. I said, I hope I don't blow it. And she goes, you always say that. I said, I know, it's because of imposter syndrome. Who am I to stand up and say anything? Who am I to write anything? But I just can't help it. I just I need to write. And I taught writing at a graduate school level. I had a lot of really good students who were better writers than I was, who were just naturally gifted, but they never published because they didn't have the drive. And that's what, if you cannot write, then don't. But if you can't help but write, then do.
I found your description of your book on rock and roll very fascinating, and it reminded me of one song in particular. So I'm not a metal person, but I do have my metal songs and that I like, right? And so Ozzy Osbourne had Crazy Train. And when you hear that song, it's, to me, when I first heard it, it was like a mental trip. And I was like, oh, wow, the music is just, going and going and going. But then when you listen to the lyrics, it's like, this is pretty deep. This is pretty, succinct in how I feel about life. And I don't want to listen to all that old metal mess and all that kind of stuff. And these people have these closed minds to, the music. But then when you listen to the lyrics and you actually put them into perspective, it's very deep. It's not something that's just, frivolous, that's just, off the cuff. It really, there's a lot of thought that goes into it, and a lot that I can relate to. So I really wish that you would recirculate that book. I'm really kind of anxious to kind of see what you had to say.
Well, it's so old, it was before metal.
Well, but you can apply that to a lot of things, so.
But yeah, one of the things that some of my writer friends and I, when we hang out, we had one named Alan Geringer. He was part of Midwest Writers. And Alan, he was my wife's boyfriend. She always said, if anything happens to you, I'm marrying Alan. I like him. And but she asked, she goes, what do you guys do at these writer conferences? He goes, well, we mostly sit around and drink and tell lies. But when we get serious, we start talking about it. It's what it's a task of creating beauty in some ways, taking something and there wasn't anything there, and making something and hoping it'll touch people's lives in some way, even if it's my goal is to entertain, but we need those kind of things. And so as we're always working for a deeper purpose, I think, than what I think part of our hunger for beauty is that, and forgive my religious stuff, but I think it's part of the hunger for the divine. God created and it was good. And so we're always trying to create that which is good. And that's part of being created in the image of the divine.
Something more than ourselves, something that is a legacy that can live on, that's enduring. Words are enduring. Our bodies fail, we come to the dust, but our words live on. So amazing. Thank you so much for what you said.
Well, I hope this has been helpful in some small way, and I appreciate the invitation to be with you.
Thank you. We're gonna stop recording.
Thank you for coming.
Sure.
Really, really enjoyed this.
It was my pleasure, really was.
Very good, thank you.
I hope that's.